Good afternoon and a good Shabbos, and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. I know today that we did not put a specific time, but it's good to see whoever is here and those that will watch it later on. Today we're going to have a taste of Shabbos, a weekly Sermonette, and focusing on this week's Torah reading, the Torah reading of Parshas Vayera, where God comes and appears himself to Abraham. We all know the story where God comes along to Abraham after Abraham has a circumcision, and he's sitting and healing from the circumcision. It's his third day, and God makes that it should be a very hot day, that nobody should disturb him. And God comes to visit Abraham and visit him while he's not well. In fact, our sages learn from here, just the way God visited the sick, so too it's a mitzvah of ours to visit a person who's not well. But what is it? We find that while Abraham was being visited by God, he all of a sudden sees in the distance that there were three angels. He didn't know they were angels. They were dressed like Arabs, but it was three visitors that were coming. And he quickly goes and he tells God, hold on 1 second, I'm going to welcome the visitors. What kind of chutzpah is that? God is coming to you and visiting you, and what do you go do? You say, hey, I got some visitors. I got to stop, interrupt God. So someone would suggest, well, Abraham at the time knew that the importance of helping another person, and therefore he put aside the fact that God was there. But what gave him that possibility? Those people could have waited too. So isn't it a little bit of a chutzpah? Let them wait 20 minutes until he finishes the God visiting him, and then he'll go deal with them. The Talmud learns from here that great is the mitzvah of welcoming guests, even greater than welcoming the Shekhinah, the divine presence. How important it is for us to take care of God's children than to entertain God himself. But what is it? Why is it that we see this such unique importance in taking care of God's children, that it overwhelmingly, even to the extent of enjoying God's presence? I want to share with you a story. It goes back about 50 years ago in Jerusalem, Israel. There was a fellow by the name of Shmuel Gurevich. He worked in Jerusalem in the textile business, did pretty well for himself. And after working in the textile business for a little bit, came time that he wanted to buy a home, purchase a home for himself. But as a new refugee from Russia, it wasn't easy to get a loan to buy a house. And somebody told him that for the refugees, if you go to the Jewish agency in Tel Aviv, they help refugees receive a loan. So to go to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem at the time with a few rickety buses, took a whole day's trip. You had to take off a day of work. He goes all the way to Tel Aviv to meet the person who's supposedly supposed to help him get this loan. And lo and behold, he gets there. The person's not there. She already left for the day. A week later, he tries again. This time the office was closed. A week later, he tries again. This time something else happened. For 2 months, the same situation happened. Every time he went, meant taking off a full day of work, he got there, and some other excuse or whatever it may be, There was nobody sitting at the desk that was supposed to help people with the loans. After about 2 months of torture going back and forth, he decided, I'm going to go one last time and maybe I can meet somebody. He comes there, and yes, the old person who was in charge is no longer there, and there's a new person in charge of handling these mortgages for the Jewish refugees. And he sits down and he starts talking to the person, tells him his name, all his information, what he needed for the mortgage. And the guy that's filling out the paperwork says, this name brings me back good memories. He says, what is it? He says, about 20 years ago, I was in the Russian army. And when I got injured in the Russian army, the Red Army, I had to be put in the hospital. And next to me in the hospital was a Jew with the same exact name like you. And we became very good friends. Shmuel Gurevich thinks to himself, and he says, yes, I remember. My father was in the hospital at that time. He was injured as well. And we would go visit him. He says his name was Nachum Zalman. Yes, we used to go visit him. And he says, yes, I remember seeing my father in the hospital and everything and so on. And he tells the fellow, he says, when we went to visit my father in the hospital, my mother had to go and bribe some guards and some people to be able to get some potatoes and some rice that she can cook for him kosher food because he refused to eat the non-kosher food in the hospital. The fellow's listening, and all of a sudden becomes pale. He starts crying. And he asks him, what's the matter? He says, do you know what your father did with that food? Do you know that with the food that your mother worked so hard to get your father, you know what he did with it? When we were in the hospital together, he split it up into 2 portions. One he would keep for himself, and one he would keep to me, so I should keep kosher as well. This is the person who your father was. I'm sure you can imagine getting the mortgage was the least part of the story. When we look at people who do charitable acts, who do good deeds, sometimes they do it for themselves, and sometimes they don't like themselves. They do it anonymously. There are many people that do good deeds, and it's wonderful that they do it, but they want to make sure everybody knows what they did. And then there are people that like to do it anonymously. What's the difference? The people that do it because since they're interested in doing the good deed, they will be kind to another person, even if it means at a loss for them. Take Abraham. He was willing to help a stranger and feed him, even if it meant the loss that he will not be able to enjoy basking in the divine presence of God. Abraham did not take a moment and say, wait 1 second, I have to be able to enjoy the divine presence. I'm basking in God's glory. Let those people wait 20 minutes. Abraham didn't think about himself even for a moment. As we find in the words that in this week's Torah reading, when Abraham conquered the people of Sodom, saved the people of Sodom, we're talking about last week, and he was offered all the booty. What did Abraham say? V'anoichi offer ve'ephraim, just earth and ashes. He didn't consider himself anything of quality or quantity to be considered. So when he sees people waiting to eat, he says, yes, I may be enjoying God's presence, but what's important is that I take care of them. And in fact, Abraham was rewarded because of using the terminology, I'm dust and ashes, earth and ashes. He was rewarded with 2 mitzvahs, which symbolize of this concept, putting yourself before somebody else, even in a case of loss. The earth was to the earth of the woman's, when she was a sota that she would drink, that God says, let the earth erase my name, but as long as a man and a woman should get along, husband and wife should get along. And the ashes was the ashes of the red heifer, that the red heifer made somebody else pure, while the person who sprinkled it became impure. A person made himself impure to help another person become pure. This is what Judaism is all about. This is what Avram ingrained every single one of us. We don't only help somebody because since we're going to get some brownie points for it. We don't only do good because since we're going to be able to put on a board and say, look, how great I am. Being kind, being generous is being kind and generous even when nobody knows about it, and even at an expense of our own. This is true kindness. This is the kindness that we look forward in this world, for the world to be transformed in a world which is no longer full of lies and self-egotistic gratitude, and only self-perpetuating its ego. We look forward to a time where kindness is one of Avram. We are there to help another person just to help them, even if it means that we will be deficient in something because of it. This is the type of kindness that propels the world to a virtuous world, a kind world, and a godly world, a world we all await, the greatest candidate of all, Moshiach now. God bless you. Have a good Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you again on Monday with Lunch Break with the Rabbi. To you and your family, good Shabbos.